Testing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm watching levels here, and we're doing good. And Carolyn Brandt is with us. This is the 30th day of July 2013, and this is another oral history interview, remembrances of the Licking County Orphans Home or the Licking County Children's Home. And first of all, Carolyn, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure.
And you have nice, good levels on the audio, so just speak up, just like you and I are talking right over the microphone.
Okay. We can do that.
Don't even pay any attention to it.
Okay.
First of all, and again, this could be listened to by any number of people who later in life want to do research and find out about the Children's Home.
Well,
so that's our hope, and what we want to do here is get some biographical information on you. First of all, give us your full name here on the recording.
Carolyn Brandt.
And that's spelled Carolyn Brandt?
Correct.
What's your middle name?
Marie.
Marie. Okay.
And my maiden name was Tabor, Tabor.
So you were Carolyn Tabor.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Birth date and birthplace.
I was born December 20th, 1949. I was born in Morgantown, West Virginia.
Good. You and I aren't too far apart here. I was a 52.
Okay.
Where were some other places that you lived, and you mentioned Morgantown there, besides finally ending up at the Children's Home here in Licking County?
Well, my first recollection as a child is I remember living in Columbus, off of Parsons Avenue. Now, of course, at that time, Parsons Avenue wasn't what it is now. It was completely different. And then my father built a house right outside of Rennersburg on Taylor Road.
Which was kind of a farm road at the time.
Yes. There wasn't what there is there now, obviously. But he built a house. I'm not sure if the reason why we went to Indiana, but I'm thinking it might be because he was not able to find work. So, and at that time, my mother ended up in the
State hospital?
Yeah, she ended up in the state hospital. She wasn't able to take care of us. So he looked up his old girlfriend and brought her to our home on Taylor Road with 6 of her 7 kids. Work was not good, so he moved to Peru, Indiana, where she had several sisters. We lived there. Her son, the oldest of the 7, was in the Army. He had come home from the Army for a visit, and his would be in Canton, Ohio. So my dad packed up her and all of her 6 kids, and they came back to Ohio, leaving us in Peru, Indiana, by ourselves. And he took her 6 kids back to see her oldest son. Was supposed to come back the next night. Well, he didn't. It took him 2 weeks to get back. And by then, the authorities had gotten wind of it, and we ended up in a children's home in Logansport, Indiana. Well, Logansport, Indiana decided that because we had lived on Taylor Road, we were not residents of Indiana. So therefore, we had to be transferred from Logansport to Newark, to the Children's Home here in Newark. And that's how I came to be. That's how my 2 brothers and I ended up in the Children's Home here in Newark.
Did you ever, and I'm kind of going sideways with this, but I just want to follow it up while it's on your mind. Obviously, your father kind of went a different direction. Your mother, due to mental health issues or whatever, was institutionalized.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever have contact with your mother again?
No, not well. We did later on in life, but during the time that she was in the state hospital, we had very little contact with her.
And your father, did you ever find out why he sort of went away and sort of basically walked away from his family?
Not sure. Never really got a definite answer.
Did you ever have any more contact with him or
Yes.
a chance to ask him?
Yeah, well, I never asked him, but we did have contact with him. By then, we were already in Children's Home. He found out about it. He came to visit us several times, which was never very productive. But eventually he then moved to New Orleans. And he came back to the children's home and wanted us to go to New Orleans to live down there. So my middle brother, Roger, was still in the children's home. Gary, the oldest, had already been he was already in the Navy, he was in the Army / Marines. So Roger and I went to New Orleans, and we stayed down there with him for about 4 months. Did not work out. My brother Roger took off, ran back to Ohio. How he got back here by himself, I have no idea. So my dad packed me up, and I had to come back to the children's home. And that time I had a meeting with I believe, I can remember the man. He was real tall. I think he was a judge. I can't remember way back when. And I told him that I had decided to go back to the children's home. And he looked at me and he said, "Carolyn, that's probably the best decision you've ever made in your life." And it was. It was.
So you came back here to your other home. So you talked about your siblings. There were you and 2 older brothers.
Yeah.
Were there any other close family members that you remember?
Oh, yeah. I had an aunt and uncle that lived in Columbus, and a cousin. And then the rest on my mother's side were still in West Virginia, no contact with my dad's relatives. He had, I think, 4 brothers and a sister, and there was no contact.
No contact. There was never any talk of you going to live with other family members?
No, never.
Okay. Let's talk about at what age and what year would you have been going to the children's home in Licking County after you left Logansport and he brought you over?
Okay. I came to the children's home here in Licking County in April of 1960, and I was there to 1967.
That included that brief time away when you were in New Orleans?
Yeah, that included that. I don't count that.
Tell us a little bit about life at the children's home. Our goal, of course, in this oral history is buildings can't talk, but people can talk. Mm-hmm. And so that while the building can't speak, you can certainly give some life to it by remembering what it was like. Tell us about life at the children's home. What was that like?
Well, the first thing I want to say is, as a 10-year-old, when we drove up that driveway at the children's home and I saw that great big sign that said 1886 in that huge building, my heart dropped. I was scared to death. But it turned out to be the best. Life in the children's home. Summers were kind of interesting at that time. I was in the children's home during the time that Mr. and Mrs. Zuger were there and Mr. and Mrs. Goddard were there. Now, when Mr. and Mrs. Zuger were there in the summertime, the boys would work in the garden, and there was cattle. We had our own milk, and like I said, in the summertime, we would have gardens. I can remember making our own ketchup, cutting up tomatoes to make ketchup. We would sit on this great big wide ladder in the kitchen and stir this copper pot with a big wooden spoon till the ketchup was done. So that's one thing I remember about the summers. Also, Rockwell International at that time had a program that they would send a number of kids to camp in Michigan. And somehow some of the girls in the children's home got the privilege of going to this camp in Michigan. We would get up and Ray Dunlap would drive us to Rockwell. We would get on a bus and we would drive to this camp in Indiana, and we would be there for a week. A lot of fun.
Wow. So you had a chance to get away.
Yeah.
So you were basically in the children, and what age were you about 1960?
I was 10.
You were 10.
Yeah.
So from age 10 to about 16 or 17, basically into high school. So you weren't a really young child. You were maybe in third, fourth grade when you got there.
Third grade.
Yeah. What? Let's maybe talk about what a day was like at the children's home. Obviously, you talked that the girls worked in the kitchen and had to do laundry and did things to help out. Did you have regular chores?
Yeah, we did not do laundry.
Okay.
That was done in the laundromat by a woman by the name of Alice.
Oh, so the laundry was taken out.
Yeah, that was taken care of. Daily chores. We would get up, I'm going to say, it's probably not correct, but we would get up probably around 6 o'clock, make our beds. Breakfast was at 7. We would do the dishes, clean all the tables off. And at that time, when I first came there were 88 kids in the children's home at that time. So the girls, that was their responsibility, to clear up all the dishes, do the dishes, make sure they're dry, and put them away, and then we get ready to go to school. So that was, and supper was at 5. So we would do the same thing again. After we got home from school, we would have our supper, and then do the dishes at 5 o'clock, and after that, dishes were done. And then we would do our homework. So that's
a day during the school year.
Yeah, a day during the school year.
I went to Hazelwood. Obviously, I lived in the neighborhood over off the Parkway.
Yeah.
So I remember the home kids coming as a group to Hazelwood.
Yeah.
Do you remember marching up O'Bannon Avenue to the?
Indeed. I went to Hazelwood, and I also went to Lincoln.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then finished at Newark High School?
No, I did not. In 1967, I went out to a foster home. They lived in Granville, and I lived in Granville and graduated from Granville High School.
Oh, actually, you finished in the Granville schools.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, let's just explore a little bit more about the children's home, and then we'll touch on maybe what you did in life later after the children's home. On summer days or weekend days when you didn't have to go to school, what was it like being able to play? Did you have a playground, or what did you do there?
There were swings and there were slides in the backyard, and there was I can remember a swimming pool. It wasn't very deep, but there was a swimming pool, and we would get in that and play. And we could lay out in the sun, and the boys, we would play baseball. There was a baseball diamond, and the boys and girls would play baseball. And roller skate. We had these, not the kind of roller skates they have now, the kind that hook onto your shoes. We would roller skate on the sidewalks, get into mischief, that kind of thing.
Zerger Hall was built in that era to play.
Yes.
Was it there when you were there?
Yeah, we had, the first year it was built, we had our first Christmas there. Other times, we had, the way they did Christmas is you got to ask for 3 items. You wrote them down, gave them to Mrs. Zerger, and people in the community would call in and say, I want to buy Christmas gifts for a girl. I want to buy Christmas gifts for a boy. And they would get your name, and then you would get, you would never meet them. At least I never did. And that's how you got 3 Christmas gifts at Christmas.
Did you think Santa Claus was bringing those, or?
By that time, I knew there wasn't any Santa Claus.
You knew that somebody was being kind to
Yeah.
you, but it wasn't your dad bringing you presents.
No.
Yeah.
And we had our first Christmas there right after it was built. And the Zerger Hall was fun. We played basketball in Zerger Hall.
What year was it built? Was it built while you were there?
Yeah, it was built while I was there. I don't remember the year it was built.
Mid-60s or somewhere?
Yeah, mid-60s. Played basketball. We had dances there. I can remember one year my brother came home from the service for a visit, and we had a dance. And of course, he danced around, and all the kids got around him because he was
big.
He was a big, he was top stuff. So we did that kind of stuff.
Were holidays lonely because you didn't have a traditional family around you, or did everybody sort of become a big family?
We kind of became a big family, but holidays they were interesting in the fact that Christmas, people would call in and say, I would like to take a girl out for Christmas to spend it with our family. And we would go there and spend our Christmas. 4th of July, we would do the same thing. Any holiday that people would want to do that.
Let's remember back to the ice cream social. I certainly remember that.
My.
And so many of the older people and people along East Main Street, that was like a reunion week. What are your remembrances of the big summer lawn social for ice cream?
When I close my eyes, I think of, we called it our sub kitchen. I think of all the cakes that were laid out. We had all these cakes laid out. I remember that, and I can remember that we would give tours of the children's home. We would stand in the front of the children's home at the entrance on the steps, and people would come up to us and ask us if they could take a tour, and we would give them a tour of the children's home. We would go through all the dormitories, we'd go through the kitchen, we did all that, and they sometimes would give us a little bit of money to give them tours. So yeah, I remember the ice cream social, and most of all because I believe it was July. It was the same week as Mrs. Zerger's birthday. I'm thinking that's how that worked. So yeah.
How did you look at the Goddards or the Zergers? Did you view them as sort of surrogate parents? How did you view the matron and those folks?
I didn't view them as surrogate parents, but I knew that they were people that would help take care of me and my brothers.
So they were caring adults.
Yeah, they were caring adults. They had to be. You have to be if in taking care of that many children. So I knew that I had security with them. I had consistency with them, which even nowadays people don't have security and consistency of. And I'm a firm believer that's what you need.
You've talked a little bit about those nice folks. What were the staff like? There were obviously other staff there.
Okay, fancy you should say that. We had two, we called them room mothers. One was named Tommy. She was an older lady. Her last name was really Thomason. Her family was around, and I think there's still, some of her relatives are still around. I'm not sure. So we had Tommy. She took care of the big girls. We had big girls' dormitory, and then we had a little girls' dormitory, which was upstairs. And that we were taken care of by a Mrs. Crozier. She took care of us. She made sure we got our baths. She made sure we were clean and all that kind of things. And when we got to be a certain age, if there was room, we would be moved downstairs to the big girls' dormitory, and that was a big thing.
Big deal.
Big deal. Great big deal.
Well, talking about the facilities, help me out. The second and third floors were the residential areas.
Yes.
And you played on the first floor, or what happened on the first floor? Tell me about each of the floors.
Okay, the basement floor, the first floor, was where the kitchen was. That was the kitchen in the dining area, toward the front. And toward the back was the boiler room. We also, as you're looking at the children's home, if you look on the left, behind the dining room was a great big playroom. It was across the hall from the dining area, and that was, the left side was the girls' side. And that's where our lockers were. We had lockers. We had a huge play area. That's where our bathrooms were. That's where our bathtubs were. Our lockers were there, and they had these great big long benches on both sides of the playroom. I'll never forget them.
Big wooden benches.
Yes, big wooden benches. I don't know whether they're still there or not. I don't know. But one way of punishment was if you got in trouble, you had to sit on the bench. And you might have to sit there for a couple of hours, but that was one way of punishment. We never got whipped. We never got beaten.
No spankings by that time.
No spankings. Now, the boys had the same thing. Of course, I was not too familiar with the boys' playroom because we weren't allowed in it. And that was clear at the other end. If you're looking at the children's home, they're on the right. On the back side of the bottom floor, that was their boys.
So everybody played together outside, but you were segregated inside.
Yes. Yes.
Now, what about going upstairs on the second or third floors where you stayed?
Okay, on the second floor, again, on the left toward the back was the big girls' dormitory. Toward the front of that, where all those windows were, was like a study room. That's where we did our homework. There was, I think, a piano in there maybe, and there was some books, tables, chairs, all that kind of thing. And then you would go down the hallway, going towards the right, toward the front of the children's home, was where Mr. and Mrs. Goddard stayed. It was their apartment, and that took up quite a bit.
On the second floor?
On the second floor.
Okay, that was the people that ran the place
Yes,
lived there.
And now, we also had TV rooms.
I was going to ask you if you had television down there.
Yeah, we had TV rooms.
Black and white?
Yeah, black and white. And the girls' TV room was toward the back, and the boys' TV room was towards the front. And I think the boys' TV room was the same room that was used for studying, where the library was. And then if you go down further on the right, the big boys' dormitory was on the second floor, clear at the end. And that's what and then toward the front, where the big stairs are, or big wooden steps, there was an office. You walk up the stairs, you walked in the front door, and then you walked in another door, and on the right was the office of Mr. Zucker and Mr. Goddard. So, now,
go ahead.
Now, the top floor.
Yes.
Okay, the top floor was the little girls' dormitory, right above the big girls' dormitory. And same way with the boys. The big boys' dormitory was on the second, and the little boys' dormitory was on the third level. Our matrons who took care of us, they had their apartment, which was right off our dorm, both the little girls and the big girls. Tommy's room was downstairs, and Mrs. Crozier's was upstairs. And in between the two dormitories upstairs, there was used to be a nursery. Now, it wasn't used when I was there, but it was used when they had babies. And it never was used when I was there.
Okay.
So that's the
That's
layout.
the layout. The grounds outside, you spoke about a playground, little pool in front. It was just a big grassy area.
Yeah, big grassy area and the great big pool with the concrete. There's a sign on that.
Well, it said the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, where the flagpole was in front.
I don't know if I don't know.
There was a little flagpole in front between two trees, and there was a stone thing that said it was donated by Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts in the 1930s.
Could be.
Do you remember Scouts there? Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts?
Yeah. And I was in 4-H, and we had Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts.
In the home.
In the home.
Yeah. Any friends that you made there or staff members that you would have stayed in touch with later in life?
I had a girlfriend. She was my maid of honor in my wedding. Her name was Esther. And every time I go to Wendy's, right across from here, she's there.
Really?
She works there.
Esther. I think I've seen Esther right over here.
Yeah, she's a heavy-set girl.
And she was the resident of the home as well?
She was a resident of the home. And every once in a while, I'll see a girl by the name of Charlotte. She was a resident of the children's home. I don't see too many, and I don't stay close in touch because your lives go different paths.
Everybody had to work. Everyone had responsibilities. Do you think that was good for the young people growing up?
Oh, you bet.
How come?
It helps self-esteem. You would do something, if you would clean a room, and you'd look back at it, hey, I did that. Or if you would make ketchup, and when they went to bottle it, there was ketchup, and I made that.
Yep.
So, I think kids ought to have responsibility.
Learn to work.
Yep.
Now, you had TV, and of course, the earlier children we've talked to didn't have television. They had radio or record player. So you actually had the television. It's kind of funny, Carolyn, people listening to this, you and I are roughly the same age here. We're recording in 2013, but we're roughly the same age. And I think we all remember black and white TV and basically having about 3 channels.
Yes.
4, 6, and 10.
That's right.
And you didn't have the hundreds of channels you have now, but you had a little selection. Who got to pick what channel you were watching or what TV show you were watching down there?
Well, it was either the big girls or Tommy. I can remember watching a lot of Ohio State basketball.
Little girls didn't get to change the channel, huh?
No.
You mentioned the trip to Michigan. Did you get to do any other field trips or anything around the neighborhood or the East End? Get to go out any or to church or whatever?
Oh, yeah, we went to church. Everybody went to church every Sunday. A lot of the kids went to the Methodist church down here on East Main Street.
Right, Cedar Street?
No, it's the other one. The Methodist. It's not the one on the corner of Cedar Street. It's the other one that's down further.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
Down across from where Dagwood used to be.
Yes. Yeah, they went there.
Or where the Salvation Army is now.
Yeah.
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 Okay.
Yeah.
Did some of them go to the Catholic Church at Blessed Sacrament or any of the?
No, we didn't. You were Protestant. Now, with the exception of my brother, my oldest brother Gary, he decided he wanted to become Catholic, and he got confirmed in the Blessed Sacrament Church. I can remember Mrs. Zucker saying, "Make sure you wear a hat."
Really? Well, it's interesting you say that because you were saying Protestant, that was a different era when there was a little difference between Protestants and Catholics, even in the community.
Yeah.
And you felt that difference down there, or did Catholic families take the children as foster and not send them to the children's home?
I don't know.
It's hard to
say. I do not recall any Catholic children in the children's home. I don't.
You walked to church?
Yes.
Everybody walked up East Main Street? Do you, this is a good time to ask it, but how do you feel about orphanages or children's homes? Do you think there's still a place for any of that?
I do. In 1967, I went to a foster home. I ended up being a cook, the laundress, the babysitter, and I did their housework.
Forced labor.
Yeah. But at that time, I wanted out of the children's home so bad that I stayed. I stayed till I graduated from high school, got a job, met my husband, and several years later we were married.
So the foster home is what got you to Granville. And
Yes.
while you went to Granville schools, you also paid a price for it. You had to worry. You labored in the home.
Yeah.
And yet they were paid to probably be your foster parents.
Yeah, they got paid.
Doesn't seem quite right, does it?
No, I don't know. I don't know any of the experience now with foster homes, but I think some of that still goes on. So I really think that there is still a need for children's homes, but that times have changed. I don't know.
You were there very late in the history of the children's home. It obviously went up after the Civil War. It was there at the turn of the century and through the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, right up to the 60s. You were there very late in the game when it was I assume it was closed shortly thereafter your departure because it wasn't around a whole lot longer than that.
Several years later, it did close.
Yeah. What kind of shape was it in? It was getting to be an older building by that time. Was it in pretty decent shape, or what's your recollection?
I remember it being in good shape. We had a man, his name was Joe. He always kept things fixed. If walls need painted or fixed, he would fix it. I never saw the children's home
in disrepair?
No, I never saw it.
Do you remember the milk house out back?
Oh, yeah.
And I assume there was a barn on the property at one time.
Yeah, there was a barn. The boys would pasteurize the milk, bring the milk in these great big milk jars, and put them in this great big kitchen, and we would ladle off the cream and put the cream in another container, and they would use the cream to make cookies and stuff like that. Oh, yeah.
Did you do canning during the season?
Did a lot of canning, made tomato juice, did whole tomatoes. Don't recall freezing any food because I don't think we had the capacity to freeze food, but I know we did a lot of canning.
Canning during that era was a popular way of preserving.
Yeah, and I still can today.
Yeah. Well, you learned the right way then,
Yeah.
didn't you? Yeah. I understand there was one time there was a chicken house back on the property as well back there where they had eggs and chickens.
I don't recall that. I don't recall that. There might have been because we did not buy. We bought very little store-bought produce. Most of our produce came from the children's home. Yeah. So we probably did have our own eggs at that time.
If you got sick, did the doctor come to see you, or what happened if you needed medical attention?
If we needed medical attention and we were really sick, Dr. Peter Sills would come to the children's home, or we would go to them.
Yep. So they still made some house calls.
Yeah, they still make house calls.
Did you have friends outside of the children's home? You obviously went to Hazelwood, Lincoln, and later Granville, but did you have friends in the neighborhood there in East Newark that maybe were you ever allowed to go to someone else's house? Or
I don't ever remember going to anybody else's house. I'm sure some kids did, but see, we always had to be home by 5 o'clock so we could have supper. Mm-hmm. That was the rule. You ate at 5 o'clock.
Did they teach manners and etiquette? What spoon to use? What fork to use?
Yeah, if you used a spoon to scrape your food off your plate, you were made fun of.
Really?
Or your room mother would tell you about it. Because I remember that happened to me when I first went there. I didn't know any different. And then after a while, you learned how to set a table.
How to sit at the table and eat?
Yes.
You learned manners?
Yes.
Please, thank you.
Yes. That was drilled into. Thank you. If you, they would tell you, what are you going to say? Are you going to say thank you? And you, oh yeah, I'm going to say thank you, or please, that type of thing.
I've got to think that most of the kids that came out of that environment, whether they went into the military or whatever, probably did okay for themselves. What's your thought?
There were a few boys, and there was a girl that I remember that did not do. Two girls that I remember did not do well. And there were some boys that did not do well. Lost contact with them, don't know whatever happened to them.
When you say don't do well, you mean they got in trouble?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
With the law or whatever. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
of course, the ones that went off and made lives for themselves, you wouldn't. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. That was interesting. What other remembrances do you have that you'd like to share? I know you brought some notes with you. Anything else that we haven't touched on you'd like to share? What about things like haircuts, and, because girls like to have their hair done.
Oh, yes.
And all that sort of thing. And as you got later in life, there's more pressure on you to get duded up. How did that go?
Oh, all the girls, they were always fixing their hair. And, we used to have somebody who would come in and cut our hair. I remember this one lady, she lived next door to the children's home, and she came over and she would cut the little girl's hair. And it would remind you of somebody putting a bowl on your head and just cutting. And when she would do our hair, we would just cry.
You weren't that thrilled about it, huh?
Now, one thing I can remember at Christmas time, we would go, all the children's home in, I believe, the state of Ohio would all get together in Columbus. And we would have this huge Christmas party. And we would get gifts. Everybody would get a gift. And then they would give us silver dollars, the real silver dollars. Mm-hmm. And then one year they wanted us everybody to put some kind of talent show together. Mm-hmm. So I was involved with a choir that one of the ladies played the piano, and she was very good at music, and she put some songs together, and we sang these songs at the Christmas party, and we would get a prize, and we got second prize. The prize was a record player.
Really?
Yeah.
Played 45s?
Oh yes, played 45s.
I've heard of these shows that were done, and even some shows that were done at the home where kids got up and performed.
Yes.
Were you part of that?
Yes. I was the curtain puller for the shows.
Where was the show done? Was there
Upstairs in the third floor, one of the rooms that we didn't use very much. We put them on up there.
had a little room for that?
And I sang when I was a little kid. I sang a song for the show, that type of thing.
Let's talk about school for just a minute. Was there any stigma being one of the home kids going to school, or sort of came as a group, and the other kids that maybe lived in the neighborhood, or was everybody pretty much accepted?
I think everybody was pretty well accepted. There were a couple occasions. My brother Roger got into trouble when he was at Hazelwood, and that left it hard for me when I was coming up. So they always looked at me to see if I was going to be a troublemaker, which I wasn't. And then at Lincoln, I can remember a teacher asking all the kids where they lived. Did you live with your parents, or where did you live? So when they came to us, it was kind of, you felt bad. I live in the children's home, but the kids didn't care.
They knew.
They knew. They didn't care.
Yeah. When your grade card, who looked at your grade card, and were you encouraged to do well in school?
Yeah. Both Mr. and Mrs. Zucker and Mr. and Mrs. Goddard looked at our grade cards. And we were encouraged to study, and if our grades weren't good, they wanted to know why, and we had to improve.
Yeah. Who came first? Were the Zergers there and then the Goddards, or was it vice versa?
The Zergers were there.
They were there.
And then Goddards were last.
They were the last matron and...
No, the last matron was a couple by the name of Burge. And that's when things went downhill.
As in they started using foster care? And
they used foster care, and they were getting children that were troubled kids.
Yes.
And it wasn't a children's home anymore. It
wasn't an orphan's home. It was a troubled children's home, and that's what led to the closing, apparently.
Yeah. It led.
What memories do you have when you drive by the children's home? Do you feel badly that at some point it has to come down because of its deteriorated condition?
Yeah. I know I'm going to get emotional about this. That was a big part of my life. Mm-hmm. I don't talk about it much. I've talked to you more about it than I have everybody. Even my kids, I don't talk about it much. And that was a big part of my life. And I know the county commissioners of now are not totally responsible. But my question is, why did they let it get so bad that it now has to be torn down? It could have been utilized for a number of things, for homeless people, But now it's beyond repair.
Yeah.
I guess that's my question.
Yeah, it's a hard question. I'm not sure I have an answer for you. I mean, the answer for the purpose of this recording is that commissioners a long time ago decided that there were several old buildings. One of them was the old TB stand, and some others that they felt were more adaptable for future use of office space, and that's where they chose to put their resources. And because just of the nature of the layout of the children's home, and also its construction, I don't know if you're aware of the construction, but the nature of the arched floors and some things did not hold up well through the years and wouldn't hold the heavy kind of office loads that are needed now. Mm-hmm. And so unfortunately, while the building was designed to be an orphan's home, it really wasn't particularly well designed to be a future office facility. So I know in talking to people that have been around the county for a while and the commissioners that they had to make a decision where to put their resources. And they did use it for a while for an office building, but ultimately but part of it is just the nature of the construction. The roof and the floors have been deteriorating, and the brick actually in the side of the building, not the mortar, but the brick. Mm-hmm. And it's unfortunate, but it seems to have lived its life, and nothing lasts forever, and some of the materials are just deteriorating to the point where it would cost millions to almost tear it down and reconstruct it.
And so I realize that.
No one feels good about it, but it's going to, here's the nice thing, and I'll put this on the tape and I'll tell you to your face so that you'll know. We're spending a good bit of money to also save quite a bit of the building. We're going to save all the foundation stones around it, the headstones, some pieces from the roof, and a lot of pieces from inside, including doors and jambs and vents and things that are very neat. Some of them we're going to incorporate in other county buildings. We may use some of the doors in restoring the old historic jail in downtown because they were built in the same era.
Yes.
So we're trying to save some pieces of it for future use, and my hope is that it's such a beautiful site that someday a new county building will rise on that site because it's a beautiful development site. So no one feels good about it, but it is to the point where it's a hazard to the neighborhood. We've had people break into it, and we're afraid someone's going to get hurt.
Yeah.
So you just need to know that a lot of this hasn't been easy for the county commissioners either, but sometimes we all have our life, and that building's about had its. That's not an easy answer for you, though, because it kind of tears at your heart because that was your home also. Yeah, I understand.
Oh, one more thing.
Yeah, please.
About the county commissioners.
Mm-hmm.
They got a free lunch there, every month.
Well, now tell me about that. That's the first time I've heard of this. Tell me about that.
And
they came down to inspect or what?
No, they came down to have their monthly meeting.
Really?
Yeah.
Now that's the first time I've heard this. Tell me about it. The commissioners came to the home every month?
Mm-hmm. And I believe the glassware was Heisey.
Well, most of the East End glassware was Heisey.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I can remember Mildred Dunlap. She would fuss. She
now,
was
who's
a cook.
Mildred?
She was a cook.
Uh-huh.
She and Mrs. Roach. They were both cooks. They would fuss. And we had a dumb waiter in the kitchen.
I've seen that.
Okay? They would cook this beautiful meal, wonderful tasting meal, and they would put it on this dumb waiter and take it upstairs.
Where did they eat? On the third floor?
No, I believe they ate on the second floor where the boys' TV room was. They would spread out all these tables, and all these county commissioners would go in there and eat.
And they'd have a dinner and have their meeting?
Business meeting, once a month.
Boy, I never got in on that. It's too late in life here. I imagine the kids didn't eat as well as they did, huh?
We ate pretty good.
Good.
Yeah, we didn't go hungry.
So did the commissioners ever come and talk to the children or see how it's going?
Not while I was there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's funny. That's the first time I've heard that story.
Yeah.
Here's one question for me, and you may not have any knowledge, but I would feel bad if I didn't ask you. We've heard rumor, and I know they've looked and never really found anything, but there was talk. Of course, that children's home was there for a long time, even before the turn of the century.
Uh-huh.
There was talk that there might have been some small infants died down there, maybe buried on the property.
Yeah.
And what we've heard about a cemetery, it's never been located or we're not aware of it. Do you know of anything about that?
Yeah, we had heard that rumor as well, all through our lives when I lived there.
You never see it?
I never saw it, but there was a rumor that it was located behind the I can't think what we called it. It was like a cellar, but it was on top of the ground. It kept our fruits and vegetables and stuff.
Up on top of the hill near the building?
It was over in the back of the building, on the top, toward the bank. And there was rumor that there was graves buried there.
And I know they looked at one time.
Yeah.
Hard, and they didn't find anything, but you're not aware of, you never saw a cemetery or anything while you were there.
No, but I know that babies had died there.
You've heard that?
Yeah.
You didn't see that at the time?
No,
Yeah, we've heard those rumors, and it stands to reason over nearly 100 years that kids came there that were sick and whatever, and not everybody could have made it.
Yeah. Myself, I do a lot of genealogy research on my family, my dad's family and my mother's family, and you would be surprised the records you can't find. I have in Morgantown, I have a cousin that's buried in the Pulpers Cemetery. The county commissioners are supposed to have a list of who's buried there. Nobody knows where it is.
Well, we're trying to do a much better job of taking care of county records now. I can say that I'll tell you the truth, that in past years some commissioners didn't take their records very seriously. We've had to salvage records out of the attic of the courthouse and the old jail, and we're doing a good job now.
Yeah, I heard.
We are. We take it seriously. But I can say that in the history of county government, not every county commissioner has made us proud in terms of the record. Not just here, but in a lot of counties. Sometimes they viewed the records as more of a burden than anything. I can honestly tell you that we view the records as our history and the permanent records, and we're doing our very best to take
good
preserve
care.
them.
Yeah.
We owe it to you and everybody that lived here to do that. Hey, I got to ask you one more question, and you've really been very open. And I know this wasn't easy for you, but I really appreciate when I saw a tear in your eye, I know how seriously you took this, and I really appreciate that. Any regrets? I know you had a tough childhood with your mom going off to an institution for a while, and your dad sort of being a rolling stone. And you say you may be connected with him a little bit later in life. I mean, any regrets? I mean, did you talk to them or your brothers about this? Just thinking back on your life and your children's home experience. Any other thoughts?
No, I don't regret it. As the judge said years ago, he said, "Carol, I think it's the best decision you'll ever make in your life," and I think it was. No, I didn't have a mom and dad growing up. I didn't have the example of a dad or a mother. I've had to learn on my own. And sometimes I made some mistakes, but I married a man that's very loving and very kind. We've been together 42 years. I have 2 well-educated children.
Well, for the record, you should put his name and your children's names on this tape in case anyone 50 years from now is listening to this. They want to know about your history. You're a genealogist. Make sure we put your husband and your children's names on here and what their ages are.
Okay, my husband's name is James Brandt. He's from Millersport. I have a daughter, Tiffany Brandt. She was born here in Newark. She now
What year?
72. She was born here in Newark in 1972. She now resides in Texas. She works for J.P. Morgan and Chase. She is a vice president of underwriters in Austin, Texas. My son, James Brandt, he was born here in Newark. He was born here in 1977. He now resides in right outside, let's say Baltimore, Maryland. That would be easier. He is now a civil engineer, and he works for a very large civil engineering company in Baltimore, Maryland.
Well, your children did very well.
Yeah, they did.
They were lucky to have a good mom and dad.
Yeah. So
They didn't have to go to a children's home.
no.
Yeah.
And I've done well. Like I said on the phone, I'm a registered nurse. I have my bachelor's degree in nursing.
Where'd you go to nursing school?
I got my associate degree right here in Newark, and then I went to OUZ and I got my bachelor's degree.
Really? What year?
I graduated in 1990s. 97, something like that, for my bachelor's degree.
So you really went back to school, didn't you?
Yeah, I didn't get my nursing degree till I was 34 years old. And then I worked as a nurse for a while, and then a friend and mine got our heads together, and we decided to go back to school. So we went back to school and got our bachelor's degree.
Anything else you'd like to add?
No, I don't think so. That's really stirred up a lot of...
Stirred a few memories today, didn't we?
Some emotions and some thoughts.
Well, the children's home certainly was a better place for having you there, and sounds to me like in the long run that I'm sure it wasn't a perfect place, but considering your circumstances, it was probably a good thing it was there for you.
Oh yeah, it was.
Yeah. Well, let's. The most